For millions of years, the earth turned beneath an empty sky, oceans crashed against ancient shores, lightning split the darkness, but no voice rose to name the thunder. No words existed to call the rain. Then, something changed. In the shadowed valleys of East Africa, a creature stood upright, looked out across the savanna, and for the first time in the history of this planet, tried to speak. What emerged wasn't language. Not yet. It was sound, desperate, instinctive. A grunt of warning, a cry of pain. The raw vocabulary of survival. But hidden within those primal sounds was the seed of everything we would become. Because the voice, the simple act of shaping breath into meaning, would prove to be the most powerful tool ever invented. More powerful than fire, more transformative than the wheel. Language didn't just change how we communicated. It changed what we were. It turned isolated individuals into tribes, tribes into nations, nations into civilizations that would span continents and reshape the world. This is the story of how humanity found its voice. And once we did, we could never go back. 6 million years ago, our ancestors lived in a world of gestures. Picture it. A dense forest canopy in what is now Ethiopia. Dappled sunlight filtering through leaves. And there, moving cautiously through the undergrowth, Sahelanthropus chadensis, one of our earliest ancestors. They didn't speak. They couldn't. Their vocal anatomy wasn't ready. The larynx sat too high in the throat. The tongue lacked the flexibility. The brain didn't yet possess the neural architecture for symbolic thought. But they communicated. Watch carefully. An outstretched arm. A sudden crouch. Eyes darting toward movement in the grass. These gestures carried meaning. Danger. Food. Come closer. Stay back. For millions of years, this was enough. It had to be. The evolutionary pressures were relentless. Predators hunted in the tall grass. Food was scarce. Survival demanded coordination. And so our ancestors developed what researchers call a gestural repertoire, a vocabulary of the body. Recent studies of wild chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, have documented over 60 distinct gestures. Each one carries specific meaning. A leaf clipping display signals courtship. An arm raise indicates "climb on me." A ground slap warns of danger. Our ancestors possessed similar systems, perhaps more sophisticated, but fundamentally, they were trapped in the present moment. A gesture can point to what's here, what's now, what you can see, but it cannot describe yesterday's hunt. It cannot tell stories of distant mountains. It cannot plan tomorrow's journey or dream of worlds that don't yet exist. 2 million years ago, something began to shift. Homo erectus emerged onto the African plains, taller, more upright, with brains 30% larger than their predecessors. And something else was changing. Something subtle, but profound. The larynx was descending. The human vocal tract was reorganizing itself. The larynx dropped lower in the throat, creating a longer vocal chamber. The tongue became more flexible, more dexterous. The hyoid bone, that delicate horseshoe of cartilage that anchors our voice, began to reshape. This transformation came at a cost. Unlike other mammals, humans can choke on food. Our elongated vocal tract creates a dangerous intersection where the pathways for breathing and swallowing cross. Every year, thousands die from this design flaw. Evolution accepted that risk, because what we gained was worth dying for. We gained phonetic range. Suddenly, the human voice could produce sounds other primates couldn't dream of. Consonants, vowels, the subtle gradations of pitch and tone that would become the building blocks of language. The first words weren't words as we'd recognize them. They were something simpler. Proto-words, sound-meaning pairings that transcended the immediate. Ata might have meant water. Not this water, right here, right now, but the concept of water. All water. Water remembered from yesterday. Water hoped for tomorrow. That abstraction, that leap from the concrete to the conceptual, changed everything. Now you could refer to things not present. You could discuss the past. You could plan the future. You could share knowledge across time and space. Language wasn't just communication anymore. It was time travel. But single words, strung together randomly, aren't language. Not really. Fire, danger, run. That's a warning. But it's not a story. The fire started when lightning struck the dry grass near the river where we hunted yesterday, and now it's spreading toward camp. That's language. What changed? Grammar. Somewhere between 200,000 and 100,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans developed something unprecedented. Not just the ability to make sounds, not just the capacity to link sounds with meanings, but the ability to arrange those sounds in infinite combinations according to rules. Syntax emerged: subject, verb, object, tense, agreement. The invisible architecture that transforms random words into coherent thought. This wasn't a simple innovation. It required massive changes in brain structure. The left hemisphere, particularly Broca's area and Wernicke's area, underwent explosive growth. Neural pathways thickened. The connections between the prefrontal cortex and the temporal lobes became superhighways of information. Suddenly, humans could express not just what happened, but how it happened, why it happened, what might happen next, what could have happened instead. We could embed clauses within clauses within clauses. We could ask questions. We could lie. We could create conditional statements. We could express irony, metaphor, sarcasm, poetry. And with that complexity came something even more profound. We could share mental models of reality. I could take a thought existing only in my mind, encode it into sound, transmit it through air, and decode it inside your mind. We could synchronize our internal worlds. We could think together. This was the cognitive revolution, and it would change the trajectory of life on Earth. Picture a cave in what is now southern France, 30,000 years ago. Night has fallen. Outside, the wind howls across the Ice Age landscape. Mammoths trumpet in the darkness. Somewhere, a cave lion roars. But inside, there is fire. And gathered around that fire, a group of humans. Their bodies painted with ochre. Their clothes sewn from animal hides. And one of them is speaking. This is the birthplace of story. The speaker isn't describing something happening right now. They're narrating something that happened last season, or something that happened to their grandfather, or something that never happened at all, but carries truth, nonetheless. Listen to the words. When the great ice came south, our people were starving. The herds had fled. The rivers froze. We would have died. But then the shaman dreamed of a valley beyond the mountains where the sun still warmed the earth. And so we walked. For 30 days we walked. Many fell. Many died. But those who survived found the valley. And we lived. That's not just information transfer. That's meaning-making. That story does several things simultaneously. It preserves historical knowledge. It transmits survival strategies. It reinforces group identity. It teaches values, perseverance, faith, sacrifice. It creates a shared mythology. It binds the listeners together into something more than individuals. It creates Culture. The archaeological record confirms this transformation. Around 40,000 years ago, human behavior explodes in complexity. We see elaborate burial sites. We see jewelry. We see musical instruments carved from bone. We see cave paintings of breathtaking sophistication. Why? What changed? Some researchers call it the Great Leap Forward. Others prefer the creative explosion. But the evidence increasingly suggests one answer: fully modern language. Once humans could tell stories, we could do something no other species has ever done. We could create fictional realities. We could imagine gods and spirits. We could conceive of social structures that didn't yet exist. We could project ourselves into possible futures and plan accordingly. We could cooperate in groups of thousands, even millions, based on shared myths and collective narratives. That's the secret of human dominance. Not our teeth, not our claws, not our strength or speed. Our stories. What were the first words? We'll never know for certain. Language doesn't fossilize. It leaves no bones, no artifacts. It vanishes into air the moment it's spoken. But we can make educated guesses. Linguists have identified what they call proto-words, sound patterns that appear across so many unrelated languages that they might date back to humanity's common linguistic ancestor. Mama appears in languages from Swahili to Mandarin to Cherokee. The labial bilabial sound, created by pressing both lips together, is one of the easiest for infants to produce. And in culture after culture, it becomes the word for mother. Papa, similarly universal, another bilabial sound. Father, appa, water, appears in protoforms across dozens of language families. Tick, small, one, pointing. These humble syllables may be linguistic fossils, echoes of the first words ever spoken. But as language evolved, it didn't just add more words, it added levels of meaning. Consider metaphor. When an early human first said, "That man is a lion," they weren't confused about taxonomy. They were doing something extraordinary. They were mapping the qualities of one domain onto another, transferring the concept of strength, courage, and ferocity from an animal to a person. That's abstract thought. That's symbolic reasoning. And it opened up infinite expressive possibilities. Suddenly you could talk about things that had no physical form. Justice, honor, love, fear, time itself. You could discuss concepts that existed only in the mind. And that meant you could argue about them, refine them, build philosophical systems, construct ethical frameworks, develop mathematics, science, theology. All of it rests on language's ability to abstract, to metaphorize, to create meaning beyond the literal. For most of human history, language was ephemeral, spoken into existence, then vanishing forever. Each generation had to relearn from the generation before. Knowledge could be preserved only in memory, passed down through oral tradition. Brilliant, powerful, but limited. Then, around 5,400 years ago, in the ancient city of Uruk, in southern Mesopotamia, everything changed. Someone pressed a reed stylus into soft clay and left behind not a picture, but a symbol. A mark that represented not the thing itself, but the sound of the word for the thing. Writing was born. At first it was purely practical. Accounting records, tallies of grain stored in temple warehouses, lists of livestock, business transactions. But within centuries, writing transcended its utilitarian origins. By 2100 BCE, Sumerian poets were composing the Epic of Gilgamesh, the first great work of literature, a meditation on mortality, friendship, and the human condition. And for the first time, those words didn't die with the poet. They endured. They could be copied, transmitted across space and time, read by people who would never meet the author, interpreted by cultures thousands of years in the future. Writing broke the chains of mortality. Knowledge became cumulative. Each generation could build on the discoveries of the last. Science became possible. History became possible. Law became possible. Complex administration became possible. Writing turned language from a tool of the moment into a tool of eternity. But it came with a cost. For the first time, there was an inside and an outside. Those who could read and write, and those who couldn't. The literate and the illiterate. Knowledge became power, and power became concentrated. For most of history, reading was a privilege of the elite. Kings, priests, scribes. The vast majority of humans remained voiceless, their stories untold, their wisdom unrecorded. That would take millennia to change. Stand at the edge of history and look back. 4 million years ago, our ancestors had no words, no stories, no songs, just the silent grammar of gesture and gaze. Today, humans speak over 7,000 distinct languages, each one a unique way of structuring reality, each one a complete universe of meaning. We've used language to build cathedrals and write constitutions, to compose symphonies and prove theorems, to declare love and wage war, to pray and to protest. Every book ever written, every law ever passed, every prayer ever whispered, every joke ever told, every lie ever spoken, every truth ever proclaimed, exists because millions of years ago a larynx descended in a throat, a tongue grew flexible, a brain rewired itself, and breath became meaning. Language didn't just change how we communicate, it changed what we are. We are the species that tells stories, that names the stars, that asks why, that imagines tomorrow, that mourns the past, that creates meaning where none existed before. We are Homo narrans, the storytelling animal, and our story is far from over. Every conversation you have, every word you speak, every thought you articulate is part of the longest-running experiment in the history of life. The experiment that asks, what happens when matter becomes aware of itself? When chemistry becomes consciousness? When an animal learns to ask its own name? What happens when silence learns to speak? This is humanity's gift, and humanity's burden, the voice. Use it wisely, because once spoken, words can never be unheard. They echo forward through time, building worlds, destroying worlds, creating who we are and who we might yet become.